I was asked to present here, and it's a great honor to come here to present regarding Tecumseh. I had a couple ideas on as far as presentations, and I felt that we've all inherited this vision. So that's why the title I decided to present on is Inheriting Tecumseh's Vision. A little bit about myself. This is my battle plan. The image you see here is just an old battle plan from the War of 1812. I'm my spirit name is Bkejwanong, and it came from an old man here on Walpole. And he's the one that told me about my background and who I am, my clan, Thunder Clan. And I learned a lot, not only as a young boy. A lot of things went through my mind being here on these grounds, because I remember dancing here. I think it was in 1966 when the last time I danced in this grounds here. I'm at the University of British Columbia and Department of Educational Studies. We have 10 Aboriginal faculty members in our faculty. So those young people that are out here, if you wanted to come out here, I have some information I wanted to share with you. If you wanted to do a graduate degree there, you could have all Aboriginal thesis committee there. We actually have a world record now. We graduated 11 doctoral candidates 2 years ago. So that was very impressive. 2 of my students were graduates. A little bit about the background, and I think there's a real focus on the War of 1812. We think of Tecumseh and how colonization of North America is at a peak, but it's actually a global epidemic. It not only happened in North America, it happened in Ireland, happened in New Zealand, Australia, different parts of the world, and it's a science. There's actually a whole process through the whole beginning, middle, and end to this process. And the major outcome is to collect resources, natural resources, without having to raise any of your own energy. You have indigenous people do all of the work to harvest the resources. All of the issues and actions of the European wars at the time had an effect here in North America. There were regional, local skirmishes going on. Of course, those happen all of the time between families, different feuds going on. But this was all part of taking place, and the colonization was motivated mostly by greed. It had to do with the worldview of the colonizing mind. And we have to consider that the colonizing mind seeks power. It seeks authority over individuals. The British colonies, during the 1600s and 1700s, the 13 colonies were the British geography at the time. That was that's where the authority was. They were making treaties, they were making agreements, seeking alliances. But they were seeking to get out from under the thumb of British rule. And we read all of these candy-coated writings about, oh, there were taxes. They were taxing without representation, things like that. But actually it was more about getting out from under the Royal Proclamation so that they could expand. And because they seen all of this land, which meant access to resources. So to expand, they had to go through the crown. Only the crown could allow any expansion outside of the 13 colonies. So that was one of the motivating factors. One of the things about the British at this time, after the American Revolution, I would say the revolution of the United States, because during the 1600s, Americans were the indigenous people. When you use the term American, that referred to indigenous people. It didn't refer to British subjects or people under the British auspices. So once the U.S. is out from under the Royal Proclamation, there's this mad rush out to indigenous lands. Business is booming. There's land speculators, slave traders, mercenaries, missionaries. They're all jockeying for position in this new land race. There's attacks and harassments of First Nations. They expanded out into the Ohio Valley, and at this time, disease, alcoholism, Christianity, treaty negotiations, land concessions, all these things are weakened. It weakens the positions of First Nations. At the time of Tecumseh, he grew up identifying, he observed the Pontiac's War. And one of the prime motivators was a home territory. This was one of the, we look to history and see that there's this perfect storm. It's brewing after the 1776 Revolutionary War in the United States. The U.S. focused on expanding, colonizing and staking claim on North American territory. In the time of Tecumseh, it becomes a choice of alliance with at least one of the many evils. There are several different colonizing forces at the time. Military strength of the British and the U.S. They were less of a priority. So the military strength wasn't much of a priority for First Nations at the time, as was the honesty, integrity, and ethics, because both entities had betrayed, as we heard from the previous presentations. The British had previously provided arms with First Nations, or for the First Nations, in the early 1800s, because they were seeking this alliance against the U.S. Tecumseh was promised a First Nations homeland at the conclusion of the war. You can see this area in black, plus all of the area around the Great Lakes, which would have been a First Nations homeland, which was made, that promise was made between Major General Brock to Tecumseh. And it was at the time on the Detroit River when he met with first met with General Brock. So this was a prime motivator, and it created unity for First Nations to look forward to their own country and their own homeland. And if you could consider the outcome of the war wasn't really a winner and loser in the War of 1812. It was more of a stalemate. The only loser that came out of that war was the First Nations, because once the British were done with the alliance, they kind of tossed them to the side And if you look at all of the policies from history, they really didn't live up to any of the alliances, any of the agreements that had been made previously, and all of the things, the development of a country as a partnership, all of that hasn't happened yet. Still hasn't happened to this day. So, looking at, if we consider Tecumseh's vision, unity of Indigenous people across Turtle Island as the vision, and Turtle Island being North America. Look at the prophet, Tecumseh's brother, Teucmseh. He brings forth this vision after being in a coma, and coming out of this, he had this vision, and of course, we could spend time looking at the real specifics of the vision. But overall, it had an influence on many people. The word spreads, and it goes out to all of the Western tribes, all of the Northern tribes, even to the South. And people start coming to the area in the Ohio Valley there. And the focus was that European beliefs were not for the Anishinaabe people. As they broke down respect for the knowledge, we find that the European knowledge that was being assimilated into Indigenous people's lives, it started to break down the strong parts of their lifestyle. So we see this today. Many in First Nation communities that struggle with their identity and have difficulty with accepting Indigenous knowledge before European contact. So overall, Tecumseh unified many tribes behind the message of the prophet. So that's basically how the vision, using that vision as a prime motivator for unity. So this focus of unity has had a profound effect on Indigenous people in North America. If we look at the overall impact on the political and social protest, one of the, after the war, we look at one of the first organizations to develop in Canada has been the League of Indians in 1919. And we can consider the influence of Tecumseh's vision on these political and social protests. The first march on Ottawa. Everybody know about the first march on Ottawa? It was in the 1910s. So that's the first time that the First Nations marched on Ottawa. Large unified groups of First Nations triggered fear in both the United States and Canada. Even today, there's that fear. Unity triggers fear in people. Whenever First Nations start gathering together and start trading with developing an economy, every time there's some kind of economic development, it's always shot down. And it's always from this colonizing line. Same thing happened in Minnesota when they had a wild rice crop. What did they do? Well, they came up with paddy rice. So the wild rice crop itself kind of busted out. Now wild rice is farmed in paddies. What happened in Canada when tribes in the United States were having gaming, starting to develop an economy based on gaming? Well, they beat them to the punch, and they got legislation that gave provinces jurisdiction over gaming. So the first time when First Nations started having gaming and having casinos, first thing they did was jail the chief and council. tell them that, no, that's a provincial jurisdiction. So those are just examples. Both countries implemented laws making it illegal for groups of First Nations people to meet in large groups. Canada had, for instance, no more than 3 adults could meet in public. They couldn't gather without approval. They had to have an Indian agent sign off on this. Both countries have also outlawed the old ways to attend ceremonies. And unfortunately, that happens today. Even today, we have First Nation communities that outlaw ceremonies in their own communities. So the indigenous knowledge of our ancestors before European contact is very important. And it also sends fear out to those colonizing minds. They understand that's a source of strength. So unfortunately, we don't have much control over that. But having that understanding and trying to identify who we are as a people is very important. And young people are aware of that today. They strive to understand their identity, and many seek that out. This vision of unity and a return to the old ways has had an impact on indigenous movements that seek to address the civil, human, and treaty rights. There are many struggles across North America. Some of the, if we look at some of these organizations, such as the Assembly of First Nations, which started as the National Indian Brotherhood. Council of Elders wanted to use that name, First Nations, and the idea was to focus on citizenship. Unfortunately, in the United States, the idea of citizenship was imposed on American Indians. American Indians can't move to Canada and can't get a social insurance number. They have to immigrate. The focus is on race because it's based on blood quantum. Yeah, status Indians in Canada still have North American citizenship because they are First Nation citizens and are able to obtain a social security number. Many indigenous movements that formed in Canada include the Grand General Indian Council of Ontario, which was from the 1870s to 1938. It transitioned to the League of Indians of Canada in 1919. The Native Brotherhood of British Columbia, the Indian Association of Alberta, the Federation of Saskatchewan Indians, Indian Nations of North America. All of these are political organizations that have responded as a method of unity. Many protests and occupations and blockades have also occurred in Canada. Anishinaabe Park in Kenora in 1975, Oka, Quebec in 1990, Gustafson Lake in 1995, Ipperwash, Stony Point 1995, Burnt Church 1999. And many of these movements today have been influenced, and the focus has been on unity, unifying people. And the old ways lead new movements. We look in the United States, where, again, U.S. citizenship has been imposed on American Indians. They've had to work within the constitutional framework. And some of these organizations are the National Congress of American Indians, National Indian Youth Council, the American Indian Movement, and then also many of the protests and occupations there are well known. The Alcatraz Island, 1969, Bureau of Indian Affairs building in Washington, D.C., Wounded Knee the Alexian Brothers Monastery in Gresham, Wisconsin, just to name a few. And all of these movements were always led by the drum and the pipe. They always used the old ways as a method of leading these movements. Also a way of attracting people to finding the old ways. And part of this, inheriting this vision, I'm using a metaphor of a circle. And the individual, the circle representing the individual. Every individual, every Anishinaabe person needs to find themselves in some way and seek out their purpose in life. That's the purpose of a vision quest. And that's how they find happiness. If they don't seek that out, they'll never find happiness, and they'll always wander throughout creation and never really find that center. And using that method of finding the center, I use another circle. So as an individual, they find their center and they become comfortable with themselves. They understand indigenous knowledge. They begin a way of learning and start seeking out their vision. And I know it's very difficult today because so many influences, so many challenges, so many obstacles to overcome. So it becomes a double challenge. Life becomes this path that goes uphill. You're always walking uphill. So once a person finds their center, then they can put that circle around them, and then they understand, begin to understand that, and they find strength, and they can always bring their family into that. They bring their family into that center. And they put that circle around themselves, and then they can add to that circle. They have themselves as an individual. They can add family members to that circle and keep adding to that. And as they grow stronger, that strength is added, it increases. And that understanding, they start acknowledging who they are, and they become stronger with developing their family ties. So eventually that strength is in that circle, in their family. And as that, we have to look out as a community. We start including our community members. So as community members, that family, we start respecting each other and calling each other brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, grandma and grandpa. And that includes all of our communities. As we look out into Turtle Island, and we start acknowledging that more than our community is out there, and we start including other communities as our brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, grandmas and grandpas. And we start including those communities and start having this unifying element. So the more that we start being inclusive and start sharing that knowledge, because all of that knowledge is spread out. It's not all in one place. It's not like a library where you go to one spot and learn everything. You have to travel around because that knowledge is spread out all around, all over North America, all over Turtle Island. So the more that you travel, the more that you seek out that knowledge, the more you're going to make connections to those people that are keepers of the knowledge. And I wanted to acknowledge all of those people that carry that knowledge and acknowledge the Anishinaabe territory that we're on right now. And I find that it's very heartwarming to hear the words that I've heard today. I want to acknowledge all of the elders, all of the people that put on this event today. I want to thank everybody that volunteered, and especially the people that made the coffee this morning. That was very excellent coffee. So keeping this all together and keeping it all whole, creating a unifying force in North America. I think that is what the vision of Tecumseh and how much we inherit that. It takes work. There's been a lot of damage to many communities, but that's only because it takes work to keep that family together, and all of our communities are family. And I noticed that throughout my travels, that there is that same acknowledgement all across Indian country that we're all related. We all seek out this indigenous knowledge. We all seek to find out the old ways, and we want to make some kind of balance living in the modern world and trying to find happiness. So I think that's really important. And again, that's my plug again for UBC. Again, so Chimigwech.